Darnell sneered when he saw the few gray streaks in my hair. "You look like an old lady sitting around," my husband said, and walked out the door to his young thing. When he came back later for his documents and found my note, his face went white. "Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end." Aisha Harmon was climbing the stairs to the 4th floor, slow and heavy-footed. The elevator in her downtown Chicago condo complex had been busted for the 3rd straight week. In her right hand, she gripped a scuffed leather briefcase holding her blueprints. In her left, a bag of groceries from the local market. Milk, bread, something for dinner. She couldn't even recall exactly what she'd managed to grab off the shelves during the 10 minutes she'd rushed through the store on her way home. On the 3rd-floor landing, Aisha stopped to catch her breath. It had been a rough day. The meeting with the plant CEO had stretched past 7 o'clock in the evening. Then she'd stayed late afterward to finalize the calculations for the new production line modernization project. Mr. Charles Peterson, the CEO of Midwest Steelworks, had hinted this morning that a competition for the head of the Advanced Engineering Division would be announced soon, and her candidacy was being seriously considered. But right now, standing on this stairwell with peeling paint on the walls, Aisha felt nothing but bone-deep exhaustion. She fumbled for her keys, opened the door, and immediately sensed the tension in the air. Darnell was home. His jacket was hanging on the coat rack, and the sound of the TV came from the living room. "Why are you so late?" his voice rang out before Aisha even had time to kick off her heels. He appeared in the doorway of the living room, hands shoved into the pockets of his sweatpants. His face was set in a scowl, his brows furrowed. "I got held up at work." Aisha walked into the kitchen, placing the grocery bag on the counter. "We had a meeting. Did you eat dinner?" "No. I thought you were going to cook." Aisha silently pulled the chicken out of the bag and started unpacking the rest of the groceries. Her hands moved automatically, even though her entire body was begging for a rest. "I'll make something quick," she said quietly. "About 40 minutes and it'll be ready." Darnell walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out a beer. The can hissed open. 40 minutes, he repeated with a sneer. "I got home at 6 o'clock. I've been waiting 2 hours, and you're still messing around at that factory." Aisha felt a familiar clenching deep inside. She knew that tone. This was the start. "But I already explained." She turned on the water and started washing the chicken. "We have an important project. The CEO wants—" "Your CEO, your project," Darnell interrupted. "What about the house? What about the family? Look at yourself." Aisha involuntarily looked up. Darnell stood leaning against the doorframe, studying her with a cold, critical gaze. She instinctively glanced at her own reflection in the dark glass of the kitchen window. A tired face, hair messed up from the day, dark circles under her eyes. "I'm just tired," she said. "I look fine." "Fine?" Darnell scoffed. "Look at what's going on with your hair." Aisha mechanically raised a hand to her head, brushing a stray lock from her forehead. That's when she saw it. Near the roots, a pale streak glinted in the window's reflection. She turned to the mirror in the hallway, visible from the kitchen, and stared. Thin, silvery streaks were visible at her temples, mixed in with her dark brown hair. Gray. When did that happen? She hadn't noticed it before, or maybe she hadn't wanted to. "You've sat down and grown old," Darnell stated, taking a long sip from his can. There was no sympathy or warmth in his voice, only something akin to disgust. "Just turned into an old lady." The words hung in the air. Aisha froze, her hands wet over the sink. An old lady. She was only 42 years old. 42. A couple of gray streaks and she was an old lady? "What did you say?" she asked quietly, not believing she had heard him correctly. "Exactly what I said." Darnell slammed the can down on the counter with a dull thud. "You've sat down and become an old lady. Look at yourself, Aisha. Always tired, run down, and now you're gray, too. I'm 45, and I feel like I'm 60 when I'm next to you. Darnell, what does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. He raised his voice. I don't want to live with an old lady, okay? I just don't. Aisha stepped back, leaning her spine against the kitchen cabinet. Her heart was hammering somewhere in her throat. 20 years. 20 years they'd been together. 20 years she'd... You're just saying this because you're tired, she managed to push out. Let's just have dinner and talk calmly. You don't really mean that. Oh, I mean it all right. Darnell turned and headed for the bedroom. Aisha followed him, her legs feeling like cotton. He pulled a large duffel bag out of the closet and started throwing clothes into it, shirts, t-shirts, jeans. What are you doing? Aisha's voice trembled. What am I doing? I'm leaving. Darnell didn't even look at her, continuing to stuff clothes into the bag. I'm sick of it. Sick of looking at your miserable face. Sick of waiting for you to come home from work. Sick of everything. Darnell, stop. Aisha stepped toward him, trying to touch his arm, but he sharply pulled away. We can talk about this. What happened? What's this all about? What is this about? He finally turned, and the cold fury in his eyes chilled Aisha to the bone. It's about me being tired of pretending, tired of acting like I'm okay with everything, that I like my life, or that I even like you. He spat out the last words like something bitter. Aisha felt everything inside her crumble. But we've been together for so many years, she whispered. We were happy. You were happy, Darnell corrected, zipping up the bag. You and your factory, your projects, your career. And what about me? I'm just the husband, right? The one who's supposed to sit here and wait for his gray-haired wife to finally come home. I've always supported you. Aisha's voice cracked. When you changed jobs, when money was tight, I supported you. I supported you, Darnell mimicked. You know what? I don't need your support. I need a woman, a real woman, not a burnt-out workhorse. He picked up the bag and walked past her toward the hall. Aisha stood in the bedroom, clutching the bedpost. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You have someone else, don't you? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Darnell turned back in the doorway. A flicker of a smirk crossed his face. And you're just figuring that out now? He pulled on his jacket, checking his pockets. Yeah, I do. And you know what the best part is? She's 28. 28. She doesn't have a single gray hair. She doesn't come home from work looking like a wrung-out rag. She's not bogged down in her ambitions and projects. She just lives. Aisha took a step into the hallway. The tears finally broke through, streaming down her cheeks. So, that's it? She asked hoarsely. 20 years? And that's it? Darnell slowly, demonstrably, pulled his wedding ring off his finger and placed it on the small entry table. That's it, he said calmly. I don't want to live with an old lady anymore. The front door slammed shut. Aisha heard his steps on the stairs, followed by the bang of the building's entrance door. A heavy, ringing silence crashed down on the condo. She slowly sank onto the floor right there in the hallway, pulling her knees to her chest. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. She traced its smooth metal with her thumb. An old lady. A gray old lady. Aisha covered her face with her hands and allowed herself to cry, softly, convulsively, feeling 20 years of her life shatter into pieces, the sharp shards of memories cutting her from the inside. They had met when she was 22. He was a student at the automotive college. She was a young engineer at the steelworks. Darnell was charming, easygoing, and knew how to make her laugh. She fell in love quickly and completely. He used to tell her she was special, that with her he felt needed, important. Their wedding was small. Then came the rental apartment, then this 2-bedroom unit they bought with a mortgage. Aisha worked, built her career, and brought in the majority of the money. Darnell changed jobs, first a repair shop, then a dealership, then another dealership. He said he was searching for himself, trying to find the place where he'd be appreciated. She believed him, supported him, and paid the mortgage when he had gaps between jobs. They were unable to have children. The doctors were never able to pinpoint the exact cause. Perhaps it was a little bit of both of them. Darnell was distraught back then, withdrawing for several months, but later he seemed to accept it. He said they were doing just fine as they were. When had everything started to change? A year ago? 2? He became colder, more irritable, picking fights over minor things. But Aisha blamed it on stress, a midlife crisis, or pressure at work. She thought it would pass, that she just needed to be patient, to endure. And he had simply found himself a 28-year-old. Aisha raised her head, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She stood up, steadying herself on the wall, and walked into the bathroom. She flicked on the light and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was puffy from crying, her eyes red. She pulled her hair back, scrutinizing the gray streaks. They were thin, barely noticeable if you weren't looking closely. Just normal gray hair that everyone gets eventually. Nothing terrible, nothing that made her an old lady. But Darnell had seen exactly that. An old lady, a burden, an obstacle to his new life. Aisha turned off the light and left the bathroom. The apartment met her with emptiness. In the kitchen, the washed chicken still sat on the counter, and Darnell's half-empty beer can stood by the sink. She automatically put the chicken in the fridge, poured out the beer, and rinsed the can. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and just sat there, staring into the darkness outside the window. Somewhere out there, in this city, Darnell was with another woman, young, beautiful, without any gray hair. He was probably holding her, maybe kissing her, telling her the same words he once told Aisha, and she was sitting here alone in the condo she'd been paying the mortgage on for 10 years. A 42-year-old gray old lady. Aisha looked at her hands. Strong hands of an engineer, used to holding blueprints, working with documents, solving technical problems. These hands had built her career, kept the family budget afloat, and maintained the home. What now? She got up, walked to the bedroom, and lay down on top of the blanket without undressing. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence. The clock on the bedside table read 11 o'clock at night. Tomorrow she had to go to work, finalize the calculations, prepare for the meeting, and move on with her life. Although right now, in this empty apartment, Aisha couldn't imagine how. The morning started with the alarm clock ringing at 6:30. Aisha opened her eyes and spent a few seconds wondering why her heart felt so heavy. Then memory brought back last night. Every word, every look from Darnell, the slam of the door. She turned her head. The other half of the bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. Darnell hadn't returned during the night. Aisha got up and went to the bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror looked awful. Puffy eyelids, pallor, and the dark circles under her eyes were even more pronounced. She washed her face with cold water, then hot, trying to restore her composure. She pulled eye patches from the medicine cabinet, applied them, and left them on for the required time. She had to go to work. She had to hold it together. No one should see that she was falling apart. Aisha put on a sharp black pantsuit, a white blouse, and a gray blazer. She carefully styled her hair into a neat low bun, taking care that the gray streaks weren't noticeable. A little makeup, foundation, concealer, mascara. The mirror reflected a respectable middle-aged woman, a senior engineer at Midwest Steelworks. No one would guess the fire raging inside. By 8, she was at the plant, the entrance gate, the familiar security guard, Mrs. Johnson. A nod of the head, the habitual walk across the yard to the administrative building. Everything was as usual. The machines hummed in the workshops, smelling of metal and machine oil. Workers in their coveralls were smoking near the gate before the start of the shift. "Aisha Harmon, good morning," called out Mike Evans, the head of production. "Are those calculations ready?" "Morning, Mike." Aisha managed a semblance of a smile. "They'll be ready by lunch, I promise." "Excellent. Mr. Peterson was asking about them yesterday. He's very interested in this project." Aisha nodded and went to her office, a small cubicle on the second floor that she shared with 2 other engineers, Omar and Tanisha. Luckily, neither had arrived yet. She sat down at her desk, turned on her computer, and spread out the blueprints. The production line modernization project was her baby, the culmination of the last 6 months. A new automation system that would increase output by 30% and reduce the scrap rate. Mr. Peterson had been closely monitoring this development for months. Aisha opened the calculation file and stared at the numbers. They blurred before her eyes. "You've sat down and grown old." She squeezed her eyes shut and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "No, not now. Work." She had to focus on the work. Slowly, the numbers started to form a system. Aisha plunged into the calculations, and for a while, the pain receded. There was a problem. There was a solution. Everything was logical, clear, and obeyed the rules. "Oh, Aisha, you're here already." Tanisha Cox, a young woman and recent graduate of the Technical University, walked over to her desk. "Need to finish the calculations," Aisha answered curtly, not looking up from the monitor. Tanisha said something else, but Aisha didn't listen. She clung to her work like a lifeline. By 11, the calculations were complete. Aisha printed the documents, placed them in a folder, and carried them to the CEO. Mr. Peterson was sitting in his office, reviewing some papers. "Aisha, come in." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Did you bring the calculations?" "Yes, Mr. Peterson." Aisha placed the folder in front of him. "Everything is ready. If you approve, we can launch the test line in 2 weeks." The CEO flipped through the documents, examining the figures carefully. Aisha sat with her hands folded in her lap, waiting. Mr. Peterson was a man in his early 50s, with graying temples and an attentive gaze. He had managed the plant for over 10 years and had a knack for seeing the big picture. "Good work," he finally said, closing the folder. "Very good work. You've put in a tremendous effort, Aisha. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about something else." Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair. "As you know, Mr. Harrison will be retiring in 2 months. The position of head of the Advanced Engineering Division will be opening up." Aisha felt her heart rate quicken. The head of the division, her direct supervisor. It was the position she had secretly wanted for the past 3 years. "A competition will be announced," the CEO continued. "There will be 3 candidates, including you. But frankly, after work like this," he tapped the folder with the calculations, "you are the clear favorite. Think about it. It's a serious responsibility. The salary, of course, is 2.5 times your current rate, but the workload is commensurate." "I'll think about it," Aisha heard her own voice as if from a distance. "Thank you for the confidence, Mr. Peterson." "The competition is in 1 week, a presentation of the projects before the committee. Be ready." Aisha left the CEO's office on shaky legs. Head of the division, 2.5 times her salary. That meant, she quickly calculated in her head, about $150,000 a year instead of her current $80,000. Darnell made about $45,000 working at the auto dealership. She stopped in the middle of the corridor, leaning against the wall. Suddenly everything flipped in her mind. Darnell, his departure, his words about the gray old lady. And here she was, being offered a position he couldn't even dream of. "Aisha, what are you doing standing here?" called out Serena Vaughn, an engineer from the neighboring division. "It's fine." Aisha looked at her friend. Serena had worked at the plant as long as she had, exactly 20 years. They were nearly the same age, had started together, risen through the ranks together, and weathered the plant's crises side by side. If there was anyone she could trust, it was her. "Serena, let's go get coffee," Aisha said quietly. They went down to the plant's cafeteria, grabbed 2 cups of coffee, and sat at a table in the corner. Lunchtime hadn't arrived yet, so the room was almost empty. "What happened?" Serena looked at her closely. "You're not yourself today." Darnell left. Aisha blurted it out quickly before she could stop herself. "Last night. Said I'd gotten gray and turned into an old lady, packed his bags and went to his young thing." Serena froze with her cup in her hands. "What? Seriously?" "Seriously." Aisha clutched her cup, feeling the warmth through the ceramic. "Just like that. 20 years and that's it." "Aisha." Serena leaned across the table and took her hand. My God, I don't know what to say. What a piece of— Don't. Aisha shook her head. I just needed to tell someone or I'll go crazy. They sat in silence. Serena didn't let go of her hand. Listen, her friend finally said. You know what I think? He's a fool. A complete fool. You're one of the best engineers at this plant. You're smart, strong, and beautiful. And the gray hair has nothing to do with it. I'm 42, Serena. Aisha offered a bitter smile. I'm not young anymore. So what? I'm 41. I've got gray hair too. Am I an old lady now? Serena spoke quietly but firmly. Stop it. He's just looking for an excuse for his cowardice. This isn't about your hair. It's about him being a weak man who can't handle the fact that his wife is more successful than he is. Aisha looked up. How do you know? Because I've seen it happen to others. Serena leaned back in her chair. Remember Tina from accounting? Her husband left when she became chief accountant too. Said she worked too much. In reality, he just couldn't stand that she earned more. Aisha remained silent, processing her friend's words. By the way, Serena leaned in again, lowering her voice. I heard Mr. Peterson was talking to you about the competition. Aisha nodded. He said I was the favorite. See there? Serena slapped the table with her palm. Aisha, this is your chance. Head of the division, can you imagine? That's totally different money. A different status. I don't know. Aisha rubbed her temples. Right now, all of that feels so unimportant. Unimportant? Serena shook her head. Aisha, wake up. Your husband left. Yes, he left. It hurts. It hurts badly. But life doesn't end here. You have to participate in this competition. You have to get this position, and you know why? Why? Because you earned it with your work, your projects, and your talent, and because the best revenge against an ex-husband is your success. Aisha looked at her friend. There was truth in her words. Life really didn't end. Darnell left. That was his choice. But what now? Sit at home and mourn a broken marriage? Or take a step forward? The presentation is in a week, she said slowly. I need to prepare. That's the spirit, Serena smiled. Come by my place after work. We'll talk it over properly. We'll have some wine. I don't want you sitting alone at home. Thanks, Serena. I'll come over. They returned to their offices. Aisha sat down at her desk and opened the file for the modernization project presentation. She started refining the slides, adding charts, diagrams, and efficiency calculations. The work drew her in. With every passing hour, the pain became a little more manageable. It didn't vanish, but it retreated to the background, giving way to focus. That evening, Aisha did stop by Serena's. They sat in the kitchen of her apartment, drinking red wine and talking. You know what the most hurtful part is? Aisha swirled her glass. I always supported him. Always. When he was in college, I was already working, helping him out with money for books and transit. When he lost his first job, I carried both of us. When we got the mortgage for the condo, I paid the larger share because my salary was higher, and all that time I thought we were a team, that we were in this together. He thought you owed him, Serena said quietly. Maybe. Aisha took a sip of wine. Remember about 3 years ago when he wanted to start his own business? An auto repair shop. I agreed to invest our savings, $25,000, everything we had. He lasted 6 months and shut it down, said it didn't work out, that the competition was too fierce. And did he give the money back? No. Said it was family money, and I shouldn't ask about it. Aisha offered a bitter laugh. I swallowed it back then. I thought we shouldn't fight over money, that family was what mattered most. Aisha. Serena took her hand. He used you. He simply used you. And when he realized you were becoming too successful, too independent, he ran. Aisha didn't respond. Something was shifting inside her. The hurt and pain were slowly turning into something else. Anger. Resolve. Serena. I need a good lawyer, she said suddenly, for divorce and asset division. Serena straightened up. Seriously? Seriously. The condo was bought during the marriage. I paid most of the mortgage. I have all the receipts. I want to know my rights. Good for you. Serena nodded approvingly. I happen to know someone who works at a legal firm. She's excellent. I'll text you her number tomorrow. Thanks. They stayed up a bit longer, finished the bottle of wine, and Aisha drove home. The condo met her with silence. Darnell still hadn't shown up, not even to collect his things. Aisha walked through the rooms. Everything was in place, but the emptiness felt physical. She went into the bedroom and opened the closet. Half the shelves were empty. Darnell had taken the essentials yesterday. On his bedside table lay some documents, papers, old car magazines. She opened the drawer. Inside were his personal items: a watch, cufflinks she'd given him for their anniversary, photographs. Aisha took one out, their wedding day 20 years ago. Young, happy, in love. Her in a white dress, him in a suit, hugging, looking at the camera. Completely different people. Aisha put the photo back, closed the drawer, and went to the kitchen. She brewed tea, sat down at the table, pulled out her phone, and opened her Messenger app. A few messages from colleagues. Ads. Nothing from Darnell. She wrote a message to Serena. "Thanks for tonight. I really feel better." The reply came almost instantly. "Always here for you. I'll send the lawyer's contact in the morning. Go get him, Aisha. You're strong. You'll get through this." Aisha looked at the phone screen. Strong. She had always been strong. She'd supported her family, worked, built her career, and maintained the home. She just hadn't noticed it because she thought that was how it should be. And Darnell had grown accustomed to her strength, taking it for granted. When that strength became too obvious, too bright, he got scared and ran. But now, sitting alone in her kitchen with a cup of tea in her hands, Aisha suddenly understood. She didn't want to be anyone's support system anymore. She didn't want to adjust to anyone else's expectations or fears. She wanted to be herself, the person who deserved to be a successful engineer, a professional, perhaps the head of the division. The next day, Serena sent her the number for the lawyer, Ms. Evelyn Pierce. Aisha called during her lunch break and arranged a meeting for the day after tomorrow. The consultation took place in a small office downtown. Ms. Pierce was a woman in her late 40s with a sharp gaze and calm demeanor. "Tell me about the situation," she requested, opening a notepad. Aisha told her everything. Darnell's departure, the 20 years of marriage, the condo, the mortgage that she had primarily paid. "Do you have proof of your payments?" Ms. Pierce asked. "Yes, I saved all the receipts. Plus I have bank statements." "Good, that's very good." The lawyer made notes. "By law, assets acquired during the marriage are divided 50-50. But if you can prove you contributed the majority of the funds for the condo purchase, the court may take that into account during the division. Also, if your husband has any other real estate or valuable assets, that is also included." "He only has his car, an old Chevy Impala, maybe 10 years old. That's an asset too. We'll divide it." Ms. Pierce looked up. "Aisha, I'll be honest with you. Your chances of retaining the majority share of the condo are very high. You have the evidence, a stable income, and a clean reputation. We can file for divorce and asset division simultaneously. The process will take a few months, but the result will be in your favor." Aisha listened, feeling her resolve strengthen. "Start preparing the documents," she said firmly. The following days were spent working and preparing. Aisha finalized the presentation for the competition, gathered documents for the lawyer, and met with Ms. Pierce to discuss the details. Darnell still hadn't contacted her. No calls, no texts, as if he'd vanished. Aisha tried not to think about where he was, who he was with, or what he was doing. But sometimes in the evenings, her thoughts would drift, and then she would open the presentation file and work until midnight. The day before the competition, Serena stopped by her cubicle. "Ready?" "Kind of." Aisha closed her laptop. "The presentation's done. The project is detailed. All I have to do is not screw up tomorrow." "You won't screw up. You're the best." Serena sat on the edge of the desk. "Aisha, I'm serious. You've invested so many years in this plant. Your projects work. Your calculations are always spot on. Mr. Peterson wasn't joking when he said you were the favorite. Your competitors are good too, Aisha noted. Walter Price, for example. He has more experience. But you have a fresh perspective and real results. Stop underestimating yourself. Aisha looked at her friend and suddenly smiled. It was the first honest smile she'd managed in days. Thanks, Serena. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd manage. You're strong. Sometimes you just need someone to remind you. That evening, Aisha found it hard to fall asleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying tomorrow's presentation in her head. She thought about Darnell, about how the lawyer would file the divorce papers in a few days, about how her life was changing irrevocably. Was she scared? Yes, but it wasn't a paralyzing fear. It was more like anxious anticipation, like standing on the edge of a diving board. Scary, but you want to jump. You want to know what happens next. She turned on her side, hugging the pillow. The gray streaks fell across her face. Aisha tucked them behind her ear. Old lady. Darnell called her an old lady. And tomorrow, she would be fighting for the position of head of the division for $150,000 for her new life. And she didn't care about the gray hair. The morning of the competition. Aisha woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Her heart was pounding like it was finals week. She got up, showered, and stood in front of her closet for a long time, choosing an outfit. She settled on a dark blue pantsuit, severe but feminine. A white blouse, small silver earrings. She styled her hair into a low bun, neat, professional. The gray streaks barely showed among the rest of her hair. She looked at her reflection and saw not the gray old lady Darnell had called her. She saw an engineer with 20 years of experience, a professional who knew her business. By 8, she was at the plant. The committee was already gathering in the conference room. Mr. Peterson, Chief Engineer Andrew Williams, Production Manager Mike Evans, a union representative, and 2 invited specialists from the company's corporate office. In addition to Aisha, 2 others were competing for the position. Walter Price, an engineer with 30 years of experience, and Andre Nelson, a promising young specialist who had joined the plant 5 years ago. Walter Price presented first, a dignified man in his early 50s wearing glasses and a gray beard. He spoke about the importance of experience, stability, and proven methods. His presentation was classic, with a lot of text on the slides, a conservative approach. Andre spoke second. Energetic, ambitious, he talked about new technologies, the digitalization of production, and integrating artificial intelligence into process management. The slides were slick, the words were loud, but Aisha noticed his presentation lacked specifics. Then it was her turn. Aisha walked to the projector and plugged in her laptop. A deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, but she managed to control herself. "Good morning, esteemed committee," she began in a calm voice. "My name is Aisha Harmon, and I've been working at this plant for the last 20 years. During that time, I have been involved in 23 projects, 12 of which have been implemented and brought the plant a total savings of over $8 million. Her first slide showed photos of the plant, production lines, workers. I want to show you not abstract ideas, but the real results of my work. The next slide displayed the diagram for the modernization of production line number 3, which she had developed 2 years ago. That project reduced the scrap rate from 7% to 2% and increased productivity by 20%. It paid for itself in 8 months. She spoke confidently, clearly, showing charts, numbers, and photos. She saw the committee members exchange glances, nod, and make notes. My latest project is the modernization of production line number 1. Aisha switched the slide. This is the most ambitious development in my years of work. A new automation system that will increase productivity by 30%, reduce energy consumption by 20%, and cut equipment downtime in half. She detailed every stage of the project, showing calculations, simulations, and projected economic efficiency. The payback period is 13 months. The projected profit over 5 years is $12 million. The room listened attentively. Mr. Peterson looked at her with approval. Andrew Williams nodded, studying the handouts. But I didn't come here just to show you my past achievements. Aisha moved to the final slides. I want to share my vision for the Advanced Engineering Division. I see a balance between innovation and proven methods, the importance of training young specialists, creating a mentorship system, and improving staff qualifications. Experience and youth must work together, Aisha said. We need fresh ideas, but they must rely on a solid foundation of knowledge and practice. I see the engineering division as a team where every specialist grows professionally and brings maximum benefit to the company. She finished her presentation exactly within the allotted time, 20 minutes. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready for your questions. Questions poured in one after another. Andrew Williams asked about the technical details of the project. The representatives from the corporate office were interested in the financial aspects. Mike Evans clarified how the modernization would affect the production personnel. Aisha answered clearly, specifically, and without fluff. She knew her project by heart, every number, every nuance. When the questions ended, Mr. Peterson nodded. Thank you, Aisha Harmon. That was a very convincing presentation. Aisha gathered her materials and left the conference room. Her legs felt wobbly from the tension. She walked into the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and leaned against the wall. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was racing. That was it. She had done everything she could. Aisha spent the rest of the day in her cubicle, trying to focus on her current work, but her thoughts kept returning to the presentation. What if it wasn't good enough? What if they chose Walter Price for his experience or Andre for his fresh perspective? Serena rushed over 5 times. Well, how did it go? It went fine, I think, Aisha replied. The committee is deliberating now. Aisha, I'm sure you're the best. Everyone in the division is rooting for you. At 4 o'clock, all 3 candidates were called back to the conference room. Aisha walked down the corridor, feeling every step reverberate in her temples. They entered. The committee was seated at the long table. Mr. Peterson stood up. Thank you all for participating in the competition, he began. All the presentations were worthy. The decision was not easy. A pause. Aisha clenched her fists. But the committee unanimously made a decision. Mr. Peterson looked directly at her. Aisha Harmon, congratulations. Effective December 1st, you will take up the position of head of the Advanced Engineering Division. The world seemed to stop for a second. Then a ringing started in her ears, her heart plummeted, and then soared upward. Thank you, Aisha managed to stammer out. Thank you so much. I will do my best to justify your confidence. Walter Price shook her hand, though disappointment was visible in his eyes. Congratulations. Well deserved. Andre also congratulated her, though his smile was strained. Good job. That was a strong presentation. Andrew Williams walked over and clapped her on the shoulder. Aisha, your modernization project was the decisive factor. We saw not just words, but real results. Keep it up. Aisha walked out of the conference room, and then it hit her. The emotions she had been suppressing all day broke through. Tears welled up. She quickly walked to her cubicle and closed the door. She had done it. She was the head of the Advanced Engineering Division, $150,000 a year, new status, new life. The door swung open, and Serena burst in. Aisha! She rushed to hug her friend. I knew it! I knew you'd win! Other colleagues followed her. Tanisha, Omar, Mike, and a few others from neighboring divisions. Everyone congratulated her, shook her hand, and patted her on the shoulder. Aisha, you're our boss now, Tanisha laughed. Just don't be too hard on us. I won't. Aisha smiled through her tears. I promise. In the evening, after everyone had left, she remained alone in her cubicle. She sat at the desk, opened a drawer, and took out her work journal. Pages of notes, calculations, project drafts. 20 years of work documented in those pages. She took out her phone and wrote a text to Ms. Pierce, her lawyer. Good evening. I want to add some information to the documents. I received a promotion today. Effective December 1st, my salary will be $150,000 a year. I think this is important for the case. The reply came a few minutes later. Congratulations. Of course, this is very important. I will make the amendments tomorrow. By the way, we can file for divorce in 2 days. Everything is ready. Aisha looked at the screen. Divorce, the official end of a 20-year marriage. Strangely, she didn't feel the same pain she had a week ago, only a quiet sense of calm, a realization that this was necessary. She stood up, collected her things, turned off the light in the cubicle, and walked through the deserted plant toward the exit. The security guard, Mrs. Johnson, smiled at her. "Heard the news, Aisha. Congratulations. You made head of the division." "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Good for you. You earned it. Been working hard all these years. Everyone sees it." Aisha stepped outside. It was late November, and a cold wind whipped through her hair. She paused on the steps, looking at the plant. The tall smokestacks, the lights in the workshop windows, the sound of the machines running. Her home. Now she was more than just a senior engineer here. She was the head of the Advanced Engineering Division. At home, Aisha walked through the condo for a long time. Darnell still hadn't shown up. His things were still in the closet and on the bedside table. She opened the closet and started carefully folding his clothes into boxes. Shirts, jeans, jackets. Everything he hadn't taken. Let him pick them up when he comes for the documents. She went to the kitchen, brewed tea, sat down at the table, and opened a document on her laptop. She began to type. "Darnell, I received a promotion. Effective December 1st, I am the head of the Advanced Engineering Division with a salary of $150,000 a month. The divorce and asset division documents are on the table. Everything is filed through a lawyer. Everything is legal. I have packed your things in boxes. They are in the hall. Pick them up when it is convenient. Leave the keys on the entry table." Aisha short, to the point, without emotion. She printed the note and placed it in the center of the table. Next to it, she laid out the documents from the lawyer, the petition for divorce, the asset division proposal, the official letter confirming her new salary, and the bank statement showing her mortgage payments. Let him see it. Let him read it. Let him understand what he lost. Aisha looked at the papers spread out. Everything was ready. All that remained was to leave. She packed a small bag with the essentials for a few days. Serena had offered to let her stay at her place until the situation settled. Aisha called her friend. "Serena, can I come over now?" "Of course, I'm waiting for you. We're going to celebrate your victory." Aisha glanced around the condo. 20 years of life here, 20 years of memories. But now, it was just a space. Walls, furniture, belongings, not a home. She walked out, locked the door, and descended the stairs. The elevator was, as usual, out of service. She got into her car, an old Toyota she had bought with her own money 5 years ago. On the way to Serena's, Aisha turned on the radio. Some light music was playing. She drove through the evening city, looking at the lights, the people on the sidewalks, and for the first time in weeks, she felt not heartbreak, but something else, freedom. At Serena's, they truly celebrated. They set the table, opened a bottle of champagne, and talked until late. "To you," Serena raised her glass, "to Aisha Harmon, head of the Advanced Engineering Division." "To a new life," Aisha added, clinking glasses with her friend. They drank. The champagne bubbles tickled her tongue. "You know what I think," Serena said, setting her glass down. "All of this happened for the best. Darnell left and cleared the way for you. You held on to him for so many years, trying to save the family, and all he did was drag you down." "Maybe," Aisha mused, turning the glass in her hands. "I don't know. It still hurts, but at the same time, I feel lighter, like a weight has been lifted." "Because it has," Serena nodded. "He was a weight. You just didn't notice." They sat a little longer, talking about work and plans for the future. Aisha detailed the changes she wanted to implement in the division, how she planned to structure teamwork. "You'll handle it," Serena said confidently. "You're a natural leader. You know how to listen, how to make decisions, and you're not afraid of responsibility." "I hope so," Aisha smiled. "First time in a role like this. It's kind of scary." "Being scared is normal. The important thing is that you didn't give up." Aisha went to sleep on Serena's living room sofa, covered herself with a throw, and stared into the darkness. She thought about tomorrow, about Darnell coming home soon and finding her note, about how he would react. And strangely, she didn't care. Let him react however he wanted. It wasn't her problem anymore. She closed her eyes and fell into a peaceful sleep for the first time in many days. The next 2 days were spent preparing for her new position. Mr. Peterson called Aisha in to discuss the transition details. Mr. Harrison, the current head of the division, began handing over his duties, acquainting her with the nuances of management work. "Aisha, the main thing is, don't be afraid to make decisions," he said, sorting through folders of documents. "And trust your team. You have good specialists." Aisha absorbed every word, took notes, and asked questions. Ms. Pierce called in the late afternoon. "Aisha, the documents are ready. We're filing with the court tomorrow. Are you sure?" "Yes," Aisha replied without hesitation. "File them." "Great. Just one more thing. I need your signature on a few papers. Can you come by this evening?" "Of course. 6 o'clock works." "Excellent. I'll see you then." Aisha signed all the necessary documents at the lawyer's office, the divorce petition, and the asset division agreement. Everything was drafted clearly, legally, and in her best interest. "Darnell will receive the summons within a week," Ms. Pierce explained. "If he wants to contest it, there will be hearings. But I doubt he will. He has no grounds. Everything is by the book." "Thank you." Aisha shook the lawyer's hand. "For everything. Good luck to you, and congratulations on your promotion. You're truly impressive." Aisha left the office. It was dark, and the streetlights were on. She got into her car but didn't drive straight to Serena's. She pulled out her phone, opened the map, and looked up the address of her condo. Darnell had probably already been there, seen the note, and collected his things. Aisha started the car and drove home. Just to check. Just to be sure. She climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. The elevator was still broken. She opened the door with her key. The condo was dark and quiet. She turned on the light. The boxes with Darnell's things were gone from the hallway. His keys were lying on the entry table, neatly placed where his wedding ring had been. Aisha walked into the kitchen. The table was empty. The note and the documents were gone. So he had been here. Read everything, taken his things, and left. She sat on a chair and looked around. The condo felt both familiar and alien. Everything was in place, but something vital was missing. The presence of life. Aisha stood up and walked through the rooms. In the bedroom, half the closet was empty. In the bathroom, his razor, shampoo, and toothbrush were gone. In the living room, his car magazines had vanished. He was truly gone. Finally. Aisha returned to the kitchen and turned on the kettle. While the water was boiling, she stood at the window looking out at the evening courtyard. Kids were playing in the small park despite the cold. A neighbor was walking her dog. Ordinary life. The kettle whistled. Aisha made tea, sat down at the table, took out her phone, and opened her gallery. Photos of their trips together, holidays, everyday life. She scrolled through them for a long time, examining the faces on the screen. Then she created a new folder, titled it Past, and moved all the photos with Darnell into it. She didn't delete them, she just removed them from the main gallery. The past. It would remain in her memory, in these snapshots, in the 20 years of her life, but it would no longer define her present. Aisha finished her tea, washed the cup, turned off the light, and drove back to Serena's. "So, you went home?" her friend asked when Aisha returned. "I did. He took his things and left the keys. How are you doing?" "I'm fine." Aisha sat on the sofa. "Honestly, fine. It's strange, but I even feel relieved. There's a finality to it." "That's great." Serena sat next to her. "So, you're ready to move on?" "Looks like it." They watched a movie and drank some wine. They simply sat in silence. Aisha felt grateful for this woman who had been her rock during the hardest days. "Serena, thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for not letting me break down." "We're friends," Serena shrugged. "How could I do anything else?" Aisha smiled. Friends. Yes, she had a true friend. She had the work she loved. She had a new position and new prospects. She had herself, strong, capable, talented, and gray-haired. Let her be gray. It was just hair. Darnell parked his old Chevy Impala outside the condo building 3 days after he left home. He had spent those 3 days with Kylie, the 28-year-old for whom he had abandoned his wife. They were renting a studio apartment on the edge of the city, and those days had been filled with the illusion of a new life. Kylie cooked him breakfast, laughed at his jokes, and didn't nag him about the mess. But this morning, she had reminded him that the lease ended in a week, and they needed to decide where they would live next. Darnell had promised to sort out the condo, get the documents, and finalize everything with Aisha. He climbed the stairs to the 4th floor with a sense of superiority. He imagined Aisha sitting at home, heartbroken, crying, begging him to come back. He would be magnanimous, refuse her, take his things and documents, and slam the door. Clean, final. Darnell opened the door with his key. The condo was quiet, empty. "Aisha!" he called out, taking off his jacket. No answer. Darnell walked into the living room, then the kitchen. No one. Strange. He looked at his watch, 6:30 in the evening. She was usually home by now. Something white was on the kitchen table. Darnell walked closer, a sheet of paper neatly printed. Next to it, some documents stacked in a pile. He picked up the note and started reading. First, distractedly, with a smirk, then the smile froze. His eyebrows shot up. "Darnell, I received a promotion. Effective December 1st, I am the head of the Advanced Engineering Division with a salary of $150,000 a year." Darnell reread the lines twice. $150,000. Head of the division, Aisha. He grabbed the documents from the table. The first page, a memo from the plant, official with a corporate seal, confirming that Aisha V. Harmon is appointed to the position of head of the Advanced Engineering Division, effective December 1st, with an annual salary of $150,000. Darnell slumped into a chair. $150,000. He made $45,000, less than a third of her new salary. His hands automatically reached for the next document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Official, with Aisha's signature and the law firm's stamp. Filing date, 2 days ago. The next document. Proposal for the division of marital assets. Darnell started reading, and his face slowly turned white. The condo at Address was acquired during the marriage. However, the majority of the mortgage payments were made by Aisha V. Harmon, as documented by the attached bank statements and receipts. Based on the principles of community property law, and considering the parties' actual financial contributions, the proposed division grants 65% of the condo's value to Aisha V. Harmon and 35% to Darnell A. Hayes. Darnell flipped further. Attached were indeed the statements, page after page, mortgage payments, almost all from her bank account. His payments were rare, irregular, and significantly smaller in amount. He had never thought about it, just lived, believing that was how it should be. She earned more, so she paid. Normal, right? But now, looking at those figures, at the cold accounting of their life together, Darnell suddenly saw the truth. She had carried both of them, always paid the mortgage, bought the groceries, covered the utilities. And he? He spent his money on himself, on his car, on entertainment, on... Darnell pushed the documents away and rubbed his face. His head was pounding. The next sheet, inventory of assets, the condo, his car, her car, furniture, electronics. Everything was appraised, everything was itemized. And again, most of it was purchased with her money or on a credit card she paid off. Darnell stood up, walked around the kitchen, and went to the window, looking out at the park. Downstairs, kids were playing basketball with a makeshift ball. An ordinary evening, and his life was turning upside down. He went back to the table, picked up the note again, and read it to the end. The divorce and asset division documents are on the table. Everything is filed through a lawyer. Everything is legal. I have packed your things in boxes. They are in the hall. Pick them up when it is convenient. Leave the keys on the entry table. Aisha. No emotion, no pleas to return, no tears or reproaches. Just facts. Cold as ice. Darnell slowly sank back onto the chair and looked at his hands. The ordinary hands of a 45-year-old man, slightly rough from working at the dealership, with hangnails. These hands had once held Aisha. 20 years ago, on their wedding day, he had truly loved her. The young, beautiful, smart girl who looked at him with adoring eyes. When did everything change? Darnell leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. Memories flooded in. Aisha was always the strong one. When he was in college, she was already working as an engineer, helping him with money for textbooks and bus fare. He hadn't thought of it as help back then, just took it for granted. When they rented their first apartment, she paid 2/3 of the rent. Then, when they got the mortgage, she put down the initial $10,000, all her savings from 3 years of work. He had promised to pay his share, but his salary was less. Then he changed jobs. There were gaps, and Aisha paid silently, without reproach. When he wanted to open his repair shop, she gave him all their savings, $25,000. She believed in him, supported him, loved him. And when the business failed 6 months later, she didn't utter a single word of reproach. She just hugged him and said, "It's okay. We'll try again when we have the money." Darnell opened his eyes and looked at the documents on the table. "We'll try again." She always said, "We'll try." And he took her support for granted and nurtured a resentment that she was more successful, stronger, and more needed at work than he was. And when he saw the gray hair, Darnell stood up, walked to the hallway mirror, and looked at himself. 45 years old, thinning hair at the temples, wrinkles around the eyes, a starting double chin, and gray hair. He had just as much gray hair as Aisha. He just kept his hair cut short so it wasn't as noticeable. Old lady. He had called her an old lady. And what was he? Darnell walked into the bedroom. His side of the closet was indeed empty. Aisha had neatly collected everything into the boxes standing by the door. He opened one. His shirts, neatly folded, his jeans, his socks, sorted by color. Even as she left, even after his words and his betrayal, she had taken care of his things. She hadn't thrown them into a trash bag or dumped them on the landing. She had folded them carefully. Darnell sat on the bed, their bed, where they had slept for 20 years. He looked at the bedside table on her side. A book, some novel, reading glasses, hand cream, simple things. The life of a simple woman who worked, came home tired, read before bed, and put cream on her hands. And he had said he didn't want to live with an old lady. Darnell pulled out his phone and found her number. His fingers hovered over the screen. Should he call? Say what? I made a mistake. Let's go back. He imagined her picking up, hearing his voice. What would she say? No, she wouldn't pick up. She had already made her decision. Head of the division with $150,000. She was already at a new stage in her life, without him. Darnell put the phone back in his pocket, stood up, picked up one box of clothes, and carried it to the car. Then a second, a third, 4 boxes. His entire life from this condo. He returned, took off the watch, the expensive Swiss one Aisha had given him for his 40th birthday, and placed it on her bedside table. Let her keep it. Let her sell it or throw it away. Darnell walked through the condo one last time. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. 20 years. They had celebrated New Year's here. They had made up after fights here. They had made plans for the future here. And now it was all over. He took the documents from the table, folded them into a folder, and pulled out his set of keys. He placed them on the entry table, exactly as Aisha had asked in the note. Darnell walked out, closed the door, and stood on the landing. Music was playing in the condo across the hall. Someone was laughing. Life went on. He walked down to his car, loaded the last box into the trunk, got behind the wheel, and started the engine. But he didn't drive away. He sat there staring at the front entrance. His phone vibrated. A text from Kylie. "Vince, are you coming soon? I'm cooking dinner." Darnell looked at the screen. Kylie, 28 years old, cute, cheerful, no gray hair, the one for whom he had orchestrated all of this. He started to type a reply, but his fingers froze. Suddenly, with terrifying clarity, he understood. Kylie wasn't love, she was an escape from his own inadequacy, from the comparison with his successful wife, from the realization that he hadn't become the man he wanted to be. Aisha had grown professionally, moving upward, while he had stalled. A sales manager at an auto dealership making $45,000 at age 45. And instead of working on himself, he found a young mistress to feel significant, needed, and important again. And Aisha? Aisha had simply lived, worked, achieved her goals, and grown. And her hair had turned gray from the work, the exhaustion, the stress, from carrying both the family and her career on her back. Darnell put the phone on the passenger seat without replying to Kylie and gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. What had he done? He had lost the woman who had been his rock for 20 years, who had believed in him, supported him, and loved him, who had never once reproached him for earning less or for not reaching career heights. And in return, he had called her an old lady and walked out for a younger woman. Darnell dropped his head onto the steering wheel. Something tightened in his chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't pain in the usual sense. It was the realization of the scale of his loss, the life he had thrown away due to his own foolishness. $150,000, head of the division. Aisha had achieved what he could only dream of, and she had done it by herself. Without him. Moreover, perhaps she was only able to do it precisely because she was free of him, because she no longer had to spend her energy propping up his shaky ego, soothing his insecurities, or enduring his indecisiveness. His phone vibrated again. Kylie texted, "Vince, where are you? I'm worried." Darnell picked up the phone and looked at Kylie's profile picture. A young face, a bright smile, a cute girl who worked as a clerk at the mall and dreamed of a glamorous life. He typed a reply, "Be there soon." He started the car and drove out of the parking lot, taking the boxes with his things to the rented studio on the outskirts. To the new life he had chosen for himself. The whole way, only one question echoed in his mind. What if I made a terrible mistake? Darnell arrived at Kylie's and went up to the third floor of the small apartment building. She opened the door, smiling. "Finally, I thought you weren't coming." She kissed him on the cheek. "Help me bring in the boxes." They hauled the boxes into the apartment. One room, cramped, with furniture that wasn't theirs. It smelled like something fried. "I cooked chicken," Kylie said, walking into the kitchen. "Sit down, let's eat." Darnell sat down at the small kitchen table. Kylie served the food, telling him something about her work and her friends. He listened half-heartedly. "Vince, why are you so quiet?" Kylie looked at him carefully. "Did something happen?" "No, everything's fine," he lied. "Just tired." They ate dinner, then went to bed on the narrow sofa. Kylie snuggled up to him and fell asleep quickly, but Darnell lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Only one thought spun in his head. What now? Divorce. Asset division. 35% of the condo, about $150,000 considering current market prices. Not bad money. He could start something, maybe try his business again. But there was no joy in those thoughts, only emptiness. Darnell carefully slipped out of Kylie's embrace, got up, and went onto the tiny balcony. He lit a cigarette, a habit he'd been trying to quit for years but couldn't. The city slept. Only a few windows glowed in the buildings across the way. Somewhere out there, in this city, Aisha was also awake. Perhaps she was thinking about her new life, her new position, about the fact that she was finally free of the husband who hadn't valued her. Darnell put out the cigarette, went back inside, lay down next to Kylie and closed his eyes, trying to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come, and only one voice, quiet and persistent, sounded in his head. "You lost her. For good. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.